Welcome, everyone. We are live with the March 2025 Network Plus study group. This is the study group that will get started in about 8.5 minutes. We are at our pre-show of the study group. That's what you're seeing right now. Let's see if I can get all my cameras back up and running. There we go. That looks pretty good. Where's my mic? It's right here. We are in the process of setting up and making sure that everything works properly. And at the top of the hour, we will be starting the actual study group. In the meantime, I guess I could put on the QA. So you're welcome to go out to professormesser.com/QA and put your digital pin into our map that you can see that's right in front of me. A lot of folks have already done that. You can even zoom up, get more clarity, more granularity. Something-arity on that. Hey, everybody. Hey, chat room. Hope everybody's doing well. We're doing pretty good over here. It has been a very busy week, really couple of weeks already. We got a lot going on here. So glad we were able to carve out some time for a study group, which is always fun. All right, next on our list. Folks are checking in from all over, from Arkansas, from London, which I'm guessing is the one in the United Kingdom. There's a number of Londons here in the United States, but I'm suspecting it's not that one. We've got folks coming in from Georgia. We got Greece here. We got folks checking in from all over the place. Texas is here. Thanks for being here, everyone. We have some great questions for you today. See, it's confirmed. It is indeed London, UK. The London that is in London. There is a London in London. So maybe it's that one. There's Frankfurt in Texas and Michigan and VA, which I'm assuming is Virginia. Thanks for being here. A lot of folks checking in. Netherlands are here. The Philippines are here. Maryland. My Maryland is here. Thanks for being here. I have been sort of setting up and making sure that all these crazy screens are set up the way they're supposed to be and the outgoing info is the way it's supposed to be. The only thing I have not corrected that I want to correct is audio. And can I boost? I wonder if I can boost from here. This is the mic. I could give a little bit more. I think I'm going to go right about to there. I don't know how your audio just went wherever you are. So I'm going to bring it down to right there. I went up about 3 dB. Hopefully that hasn't blown out your eardrums, but we're going to try that as what we are doing today. So we will make sure that our audio is working. I need to tweak some of my audio ones and twos on this side. There's a lot that I have to do with audio. Some of you may have heard I talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the year. In January, we put in a new audio component, new audio chain, as we like to say in the industry. So there's all these little tweaks I've been doing to it, and I'm about to produce a new course and put it online. So we are adjusting and configuring the audio to be consistent across all of those. That is the last piece in the puzzle that I've not done, is this mixer. So that is my next big step. But that should help. Giving it a little bit of boost there should help a bit. I'm still not maxing out, and I think it's giving the right numbers. I went and looked at some of the stats on YouTube, which is a great place to go to figure out how things are working out with the videos that I've uploaded. And you can get a lot of good statistics by right mouse clicking and doing the stats for nerds. And I can see that there's a lot more room that we could use to go up a bit. So this will help a little bit on this one, and I'll look at the numbers once we are done with this live stream, and we'll see how the numbers look on that one. But it's difficult sometimes because you can see over here I have a audio meter, and some meters are listed in different values. So it's hard sometimes. In fact, you may be able to see on the mixer, there are also meters on the mixer that are there. And you can kind of see the microphone and the main mix out. And there's only 2 channels that are there right now, 1 input, 1 output. And there's a lot that need to be tweaked on there. So we will get there eventually. We're working through the details of that. For 3.5 minutes to go, we'll get things started. Make sure you got your Q&A ready to go for Network Plus. This should be pretty good. I've got a lot of good Network Plus questions in today's live stream, and I've even already written the questions for next week, which is very unusual for me, but it's now, so it's done. It's over there. And so I don't have to worry about writing those for the Security Plus study group next week. Let's see if I can get my mic where I want it to be. So this is an end-fed mic, so I'm trying to figure out the best place to put it so that I don't go off the middle of this. This live stream is saved. All the live streams are available to watch on the replay immediately afterwards. I hit the stop button, and then it will automatically, it takes a couple minutes, it re-renders it and stores it. So you will always be able to see. And of course, I've got a replay section on my website. You can go back and look at all the replays from the main menus of the Professor Messer website. So there's a lot going on there. A lot. Network Plus, not a lot going on. I shouldn't say that. There's, of course, always something going on, but it is not, it's current. We just finished a switchover, a retirement at the end of the year. So this is sort of a newer course in the 3.5 year cycle of CompTIA courses. This is a relatively new course. So we're getting there. We are making it happen. Folks are checking in from Huntsville, Alabama, and Atlanta. There's Hamilton, Ontario. They're good to see you, Hamilton. I got kinfolk in Hamilton, so thanks for being here. Chicago's here. We got folks in South Africa. Thanks for being here. There is a lot of scope. Networking applies across the globe, obviously. So it's nice that we're able to pull folks in from all over the place and just have a little bit of fun, just to see what we can do on this live stream. It's never a dull moment, is it? Now let's see. I have about a minute and a half before we get started. We'll see how things work out. There's Charlotte checking in. There's folks in the Triad checking in, North Carolina. They're in that very tech-centric area. Thanks for being here. Chicago's here. More Virginia's checking in. And we got a minute to go. So let's make sure that I am ready to go on my side. I should probably check things like the other live stream stuff. That looks fine. Cameras look good. We are recording down here. I've already done my podcast intro, so we're good there. I think at this point, we just need to kind of get ready, make it happen. There is, I hope everybody's ready to answer questions too, because I got some great Network Plus questions coming. Make sure that you are up to speed with your exam objectives, and I think we'll be okay. It's now getting close to our start time. Everything looks fine. I'm looking at stats on the cache, which look very good. Stats online. YouTube's reporting to me says that they're receiving the information very good. All we have to do now is get comfortable. Now's the time. So let's see if I have everything I need to have in front of me. I think that I do. And let's do a live stream, everybody. What do you think? Let's get me on the big picture. That's me right there. So hi, how am I doing? I think I've got presentation ready to go. I think at this point, it's just a matter of making it happen. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2025 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and we get to see how well you know some of those topics. We will be going through quite a few topics today, so feel free to get comfortable, make yourself something to drink, get in a chair. I'm going to start up my presentation on this side and make sure that you are able to see it. And at that point, we have everything that we need. We would love for you to join us if you are here live and be able to answer these questions along with us. Did I say February? Or did I say March? Did I say March? Did I say February? Who knows? It is. What did that say? Did the graphic say something different? It did say February. That is exactly not what we're doing today. What a lovely view that will be, isn't it? That's how you know it's a live event right there, is that the graphics right there. Look a lot better. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the March 2025 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. Everything else was correct except the pretty pictures. Now the pretty picture is correct too. Thank you, chat room. You guys are awesome. Always making sure everything's working the way it should. This is also one of the things that you can do to join us and correct me when I am wrong. Go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer all of the questions that we are going to do today. I always have questions for you. And by asking the questions there or going to that view there, you can answer the ones that are there. In fact, I have for you a question from last month. The question from last month, we call our rewind question, is last month. This rewind question, see if you remember the answer to this one. It asks, a network administrator would like to automatically use a backup link if the primary network connection fails. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be EIGRP, LDAP, ACLs, IPsec, or RSTP? Now, as many of you are aware, this is something where you do not answer in the chat room, please. No answers there, no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to answer this question. That's the one that's right there, and be able to answer all of the questions that we will do today. It's that one URL you have to know, and as long as you're there, you can stay on that page, and the questions will automatically update as we go. If you're watching this on a replay, that obviously will not be available to you. You'll go to that link, and there won't be anything there, but you could still follow along with us here on the video. Just make a note of what you think the right answer is, and we will go from there. This is our study group for the Network Plus study group. This is one, if you are ever in a place where you need to be able to test yourself on how well you know Network Plus, this is a great place to be. Of course, we are not always doing a live stream, and when we are not here, we have our videos that you can watch on our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. That will be a great place to go to subscribe, for example. Don't forget about our weekly Network Plus pop quiz questions on the service formerly known as Twitter, now X. You can go to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X. And we also put those same questions on Instagram. You can find them at professormesser.com/Instagram. All of these will be for the Network Plus, the N10-009. That is the current version of the Network Plus exam. That was an exam version that was released on June the 20th of 2024, not even a year ago. This is a relatively new version of the Network Plus certification. That means that we don't have to worry about retirement of those questions because they're going to retire somewhere around the fourth quarter of 2027. So you have plenty of time to work on your Network Plus content. The exam itself is a single exam. It's an exam that is 90 minutes in length. That's all the time you get. You could get a maximum of 90 questions on the exam, although you might get fewer than 90 questions on the exam. And you need to earn a 720 on a scale between 100 and 900. That's a difficult calculation. In fact, we aren't even sure how CompTIA calculates these numbers. All we have to do is make sure that we do the best we can and hope the number turns out to be a 720. And once you have that, you are Network Plus certified. Once you earn that certification, your certification is good for 3 years. So at that point, these exam numbers up here won't matter to you because you've already passed the exam. The exam itself consists of 2 different styles of questions. One, and the vast majority of questions on the exam, is the multiple choice questions, but you will get a handful of questions at the beginning of the exam, and they are what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. That means that they are not multiple choice. That's all that really means. And we will be, as our very first new question of the month, I'll give you a performance-based question today. I want to see how well you do with this one, so get ready for that in just a minute or so. Of course, we have not just our Network Plus content on our website, but so much more. You can watch all of our free videos on our YouTube channel. But if you'd like some additional study materials, you can find them in our Success Bundle. You can find that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. It's all on our website, and you can find out more details from the main menu of our site as well. This is something, when we do these live streams, that are available immediately afterward to watch on YouTube. But I also send an audio-only version of this, I send to a podcast distribution method. So if you would like to add this to your favorite podcast listening program, you can do that. You can go to professormesser.com/podcast and find all of the information you need right there. A number of podcast websites already have us in their index. And if you go to a site that does live stream video or live stream audio, like Spotify, for example, you can simply search for Professor Messer on Spotify, and you will find all of those there as well. As I mentioned, immediately after this live stream is over, you can watch this replay. And about a day after that, you'll notice that the YouTube video description is suddenly populated with all of the timestamps associated with this live stream. That's not something that happens automatically. That's thanks to the hard work of my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this on the replay. Hi, Lori. Hope everything's going well. I have so many other things that are going on this side. It's nice to have someone go through all of the details of that, and you can go back years to find anything you might want with that live stream content. So that is another place you can go to figure out the details. Hopefully that will give you a perspective of what you need to know for this. I also have, as we are flipping through the other details of this, I obviously am not doing a live stream all the time, but I do have live streams available that on replay. When we're not there, you can, of course, go to our Discord, which is at professormesser.com/Discord, to be able to join us with our live chat. We're there all the time, along with thousands of other people who are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and much more. So lots that you can find there as well. Make sure you have a look. It is all at our Discord link at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take the exam. That's something that you will have to do. I guess you don't have to do it, but if you'd like to be certified, you do have to take the exam. And of course, the exam requires that you take, have to pay for the exam. You have to buy a voucher to be able to do that. The vouchers that I have on my site are discounted. They are only available for folks that are in the U.S., Canada, or U.S. territories, however. You can find them at professormesser.com/vouchers. You don't need anything special to be able to make that happen. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need to go to a certain page. They're just all discounted automatically. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers for all of those. And if you buy the voucher from my site, I'll even give you a little bit extra. You'll get an Exam Hacks ebook for free. This is an ebook that I put together with a series of tips and tricks that I use to do the best that I can on these exams. Not only study tips in there, but I give you tips for what you can do during the exam to optimize that final score. This is something that might help you. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you are specifically looking for the Exam Hacks book, this is something we don't sell separately. It's only available with our vouchers and only available with our success bundles. You can't get it any other way. So a bit of exclusivity for you folks that have got the vouchers or the success bundles. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which was, a network administrator would like to automatically use a backup link if the primary connection fails. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it EIGRP, LDAP, ACLs, IPsec, or RSTP? Sounds like I'm speaking a different language. It's just a bunch of letters, isn't it? Let's see what you chose on this one. We had a relatively small number choose this one. On the last one, we have the choice. Really, two specific answers came in as the top pick. EIGRP got 41% of the vote, and RSTP got 36% of the vote. We have LDAP at 12%, IPsec at 7%, and ACLs at 4%. Well, if you are trying to manage a link across a separate network, then you're going to need to use some type of routing protocol that can converge over to a different layer 3 connection. And one of the best ways to do that is with a routing protocol that is able to take that into account. You could use BGP, you could use OSPF, you could use RIP version 2, or you could use EIGRP, the Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol. Many people associate this with Cisco because all of the Cisco devices run EIGRP. It is a Cisco-created routing protocol. And of course, there are a lot of folks that are working through trying to get their network set up with some type of redundancy. And one of the best ways you can do this to a remote site is through using a routing protocol such as EIGRP. That is the answer we were looking for. 41% of you chose EIGRP, but 36% of you chose the Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. Spanning Tree Protocol is there to prevent loops on the network, not to handle moving to a different link if a network connection fails. In fact, many network connections could fail, and as long as there's not a loop, the Spanning Tree Protocol won't do anything. Spanning Tree Protocol only kicks in if there is a loop. That's the only time you'll see that happening. So whenever that happens, we want to be able, of course, to do that. And of course, Spanning Tree Protocol only works on layer 2. It is a switching protocol, if you want to think of it that way. When we are connecting to a separate backup link, a backup network connection, it will almost always be over layer 3 connection. So in that particular case, we can discount anything that would work at layer 2, like Spanning Tree. And after all, Spanning Tree doesn't handle redundant links. It is one that maintains a non-looped configuration. So keep that in mind too. We have a lot of other options in here. LDAP is the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol for accessing network directories, like Active Directory is a good example of one that you can access using the LDAP protocol that has nothing to do with using a backup link. We have IPsec that is used for tunnels, especially encrypted tunnels that we use for VPNs. That, again, has nothing to do with backup links. And an ACL, an access control list, also has nothing to do with moving over to a backup link. The only option in here that makes any sense is indeed EIGRP, and 41% of you got that one absolutely correct. That's what we are looking for and what we are hoping for. That is exactly the right answer. We did have a lot more people this time choose Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol, which is interesting. But of course, that also has nothing to do with providing a backup link if a primary connection fails. So hopefully that can give you an idea of what the options might be. Now that we've looked at a question we had last week and we evaluated and understood the differences there, let's now do a different question. And this different question is going to be one that is a performance-based question. I told you we'd have one of those in our study group. This performance-based question, obviously performance-based questions can take many forms. They could be a fill-in-the-blank question. It could be a matching question. It might be a drag-and-drop question. It could be one where you choose from pull-down menus. Or it could be one that we are at a prompt on our computer, and it may ask us to perform a function. And that last one is the one that I chose for today's performance-based question. A number of people have wanted a, if you will, a simulation-style performance-based question, because obviously not all performance-based questions are simulation questions, but simulation questions can be a performance-based question. So make your own Gantt chart for all of you working on those. Or a Venn diagram would not be a Gantt chart in that case. Make your own Venn diagram to be able to figure out those details. Here's your performance-based question of the month from the command line, the one that you see here on your screen. I would like you to identify the FQDN of 1.1.1.1. So what I'm looking for you to submit is what would you type at the command line to obtain the FQDN of 1.1.1.1. And for a little bit of bonus points, although we don't have points and it's all made up, I'll still give you bonus points, because why not, if you tell me what the FQDN is. So there's a couple of things you can do here. So hopefully you have a prompt like this available to you and you're able to type this in. If you don't have a prompt like this available to you, then you could simply type in what you think you would use at that prompt to be able to give me the answer that we are looking for. And bonus points for identifying the FQDN. What is the FQDN? Nobody's even submitted. A lot of people are submitting their answers. And by the way, a lot of people know what the answer is. I'm watching them as they are coming in. And we've got a few people that have not only given me what the command is that you would use to find this, but you have also given me the FQDN, which I find is a little bit cheeky, isn't it? It's a little interesting, this FQDN. See how well you do with this one. Not too much of a giveaway. Some of you, in fact, I don't want to say any more about the answer itself because I want to demonstrate the answer to you and to tell you what you would use if you were not at this command prompt, but you were perhaps at a different command prompt. So we may try a couple of different things at the end of this one. So if you know the answer, submit the answer by this on your screen, going to that link, professormesser.com/QA, and locking in your answer. See if you happen to know where that one is. This should be a pretty interesting answer because I think almost everyone is going to get the fully qualified domain name for this one. See, I've already given you a hint. It snuck out of there. But I also want to tell you that choosing the FQDN here, how did it know what the FQDN was when you submitted the query? How did it know to give you that information back? So there's a number of things we can think about, and a number of things that are in scope with the Network Plus exam, and it would be useful to know that as well. We have had a number of people submit your answers, so let's see what I think the answer is, and we are going to see what this happens to be. And by the way, when I say bonus points for identifying the FQDN, I'm not looking for you to tell me what those initials are. I'm looking for the actual FQDN associated with 1.1.1.1. So I'm trying to answer the question that we posed at the very top of this. A lot of people are telling me, FQDN means fully qualified domain name. Yes, it does. Not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else. I'm looking for the actual FQDN. Let's see how we did with this one. Should be pretty good. Let's step through the details of this. Here's how I did it on my computer, because this is a Windows front end. This is a Windows command prompt. So you can see on this Windows command prompt, the utility that is there by default that allows you to interact with some type of DNS server. And that's what we're really asking for here. Identifying the fully qualified domain name is information that is stored in DNS, the domain name system. And specifically, we want the fully qualified domain name of 1.1.1.1. In Windows, this is a relatively quick and easy one to do. The NSLOOKUP command is what we were looking for. That stands for name server lookup. It's always helpful to be able to pull those out of the list. And for this particular query, instead of putting in a fully qualified domain name, you simply put in the IP address you would like to perform the reverse lookup on. So there's the difference between just a standard DNS lookup and a reverse lookup. A standard DNS lookup would be nslookup www.professormesser.com. You would use the fully qualified domain name because, after all, that's what we're doing the most of. We're typing in a name in our browser, and somehow behind the scenes, it's able to find the IP address. It's able to do that using DNS. And this nslookup command allows us to poke into that little tiny query, be able to perform some diagnostics to that DNS server, get a little feel for what's happening behind the scenes. And that's something that we can add. Now, if you want to do a reverse, you simply change the parameters of this to be the IP address. So an NSLOOKUP of 1.1.1.1 actually returns the fully qualified domain name of 1.1.1.1. I told you it was a little cheeky. For those of you listening on the podcast, what it returns is one.one.one.one. 1.1.1.1. They've actually named the server of 1.1.1.1 with the name 1.1.1.1.1. Yes, very, very interesting. That, by the way, is a Cloudflare DNS IP address. For those of you not familiar with Cloudflare, it's a great reverse proxy service. They provide a number of security features. If you are accessing, for example, the Professor Messer website, you are not accessing it directly. You are actually going through one of the Cloudflare servers, and that is doing a reverse proxy back to me. Just another security layer that is between you and the web server, helps me maintain uptime and availability. It's a great service. They also provide a free VPN service. So if you're looking for a service you'll be able to use this. And folks on the chat were saying they should call this service ONEDOT. I like that. They should. Interestingly enough, their VPN service is called 1.1.1.1 with the numbers. So if you go into, for example, the Apple Store on your phone and you need a VPN for your phone, you can use 1.1.1.1. You can turn it on, turn it off. It's a great little VPN to use. Doesn't provide a huge number of features, but it does provide a number of features, and that's really sometimes all you need. There are other commands you could use to do this, but it may not be quite as straightforward as you might think. I have on my screen let's bring this up so you can see it. This is the console on my computer that's in front of me. So for those of you that were in the pre-show, this is the console that I use on my computer, which is a Mac OS device. So obviously in Mac OS, NSLookup is something that is available, and I could use it because I have a separate utility that uses a different, I think it reverts back to dig. It just uses an alias for NSLookup. But that's not what I want to do. On my computer, dig is what I would use. So dig is great. It's a fantastic utility. It is sort of the Linux or Mac OS version of NSLookup. In practicality, NSLookup is deprecated. I think everybody's sort of moving over to dig to make that happen. However, using dig with the same parameters as what we were using, let me move myself over here so we can see this a little bit better. It shows the answer comes through with not the information we were hoping for. We just got a breakdown of our server that said, sorry, couldn't find the name 1.1.1.1. It interpreted the 1.1.1.1 as a fully qualified domain name. So for dig, you have to use a little bit different parameter to do a reverse lookup. Let's see if I can remember. I think it's the -x. Let's see if it really is, and it is. So if you do a dig -x 1.1.1.1, the IP address you would like to perform the reverse DNS, it gives you the answer 1.1.1.1. So that's how you would do it if you were using dig instead of using, that's the wrong screen, there we go, instead of using the one that we were just working with. So that gives you at least some context as to what you can use. Hopefully that's given you a little more than just a little bit of context. That is really a nice breakdown of the different features that we want to be able to use with this. So if you are using Linux, if you're using Mac OS, you have options for all of these. That's how you would obtain, that's what you would type at the command line to do this. And now you know how to get the fully qualified domain name from this. And that's exactly how this would work as well. Traceroute technically might work. Ping might actually work for something like this as well, because those utilities perform a reverse lookup as part of what they are doing, but it also does a lot of other things too. So that would not really be the best answer for this, and in many times would not give you the granularity of what you are looking for. So that should give you a couple of different ways to look at this. The most functional way to directly interact with the name server to provide this information, which really is the best way to do it, is to either use NSLookup, which is what you would use in Windows, or to use dig. If you used either of those to make this happen, you got this one absolutely correct. Well done. That is our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's taught you a little bit, or at least solidified in your mind what you would use if you are using Windows, Linux, or Mac OS to perform all of these similar features. Should give you an idea of where to focus with all of those. Okay, now let's change direction a bit. We've now done our performance-based question of the month. Now let's go back to looking at some multiple choice questions that we have. Next on our list is this multiple choice question, and it asks, a network administrator has been provided a community string. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this information? Would it be server monitoring, IPS signature, VLAN definition, web server certificate, or IPsec VPN authentication? That's a few things to go through there. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA to lock your answer in. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, we're looking at the message on our screen. The question says, a network administrator has been provided a community string. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this information? Would it be server monitoring, IPS signature, VLAN definition, web server certificate, or IPsec VPN authentication? Lock in your answers by visiting the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. And just as a reminder, please, no answers in the chat room. Let's see how well we do with this one. You may have actually used this before. If you're in a networking role, this might be something you've already run into, working through the details of this. Hopefully a lot in there to be able to work through. Some folks in the chat room were saying, would dig be an appropriate answer for that previous question? Well, it probably wouldn't, because Windows does not ship with the dig utility. And the command prompt that you saw on the screen was a Windows command prompt. So I was hoping that you would put together all of the different pieces of that particular puzzle. I would give you credit because there are ways that you can install a dig executable, a Windows executable in your Windows desktop. However, that dig executable that is provided in the bind package, bind, B-I-N-D, it's a type of DNS server. They used to ship the dig executable for Windows as part of bind. They no longer do that, but you can go back and find an older version of bind. In fact, an older version is still downloadable on the bind website. You can download that older version, pull out the executable, stick it in Windows, and use it. In fact, I have a video on how to install dig in Windows, just so you can step through the process. It's relatively straightforward in being able to work through that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to not put the operating system in there, so that you could see the prompt, understand what your options are. After all, that's probably what the situation you'll be in. Somebody will say, here's the server, find this information. Okay, what am I on right now? Am I on Mac OS? Am I on Windows? Am I on Linux? Okay, I'm on this. Now what commands do I use? So not telling you the operating system was actually part of the question. So for that reason, NSLOOKUP is the right answer, and dig would not be the correct answer. If you were sticking to the rules, that's what the answer would be for all of that. Let's answer this question, though. That question again asks, a network administrator has been provided a community string. Which of the following would be the most likely use of this information? Would it be server monitoring, IPS signature, VLAN definition, web server certificate, or IPsec VPN authentication? Let us close the poll and see how you did. Exactly 50% of you say the answer is server monitoring. 19% say it's a web server certificate. 14% say IPsec VPN authentication. So double digits all the way down the line, and then pretty high single digits. 9% say IPS signature and 8% say VLAN definition. Well, the majority, I'm going to say it's 50.01% of you, say the answer is server monitoring, pretty close to a majority anyway. That's a pretty solid number. Community strings are part of SNMP. They are what your SNMP server uses to send a query to another device and be able to authenticate that particular query. You can't just send any SNMP query to any device and expect it to respond to you. There needs to be some type of shared secret between the two. And in this case, for SNMP, the shared secret is called a community string. Why didn't we call it a password? Technically, it's not really a password. It's more of an access code. Why didn't we call it an access code? Maybe that would have made more sense. A community string doesn't exactly describe what it is, but it is a password style support access that allows you to authenticate. And in many cases, SNMP could have multiple authentication strings, multiple community strings that you could use. Using a community string, for example, a public, many devices ship by default with the public community string turned on. That is a read-only community string. So you can query information, but you can't change anything on that device. However, if you know the read-write community string. In many cases, that read-write community string by default is set to private. If you find that, you can make changes to that SNMP statistic, that metric that's on a device. You can enable and disable ports. You can change the configuration of different interfaces. You can modify what's on that device. In some cases, you can restart the device using SNMP. And you can do that if you have the read-write community string. Now, this is a community string, and this style of community string is used with SNMP version 1 and SNMP version 2. The most common flavor of SNMP version 2 that's used is SNMP version 2C. So often you will see almost everything mention SNMP version 1, SNMP version 2C, and SNMP version 3. Version 3 is a little bit better. It uses what we traditionally think of as authentication, a username and password. You can also set that up in anything that recognizes SNMP v3. But I'll bet that you will find many devices out there that don't know anything about SNMP v3, and you have to revert back to SNMP v2, v2c, or SNMP v1. So that is exactly the situation we find ourselves in. So community string is something that we would use that is based on SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol. If you are managing a device, that is what you would be using. So monitoring the server is what you would use for SNMP, and you would need the community string to gather that information. If you answered server monitoring, you got it right. That is the right answer. We would not use a community string as dealing with a web server certificate. Those don't use community strings. Web server certificates are much more involved than that. So community strings are not the right answer for that choice. We have 14% of views that said a VPN authentication, specifically over IPsec. It is not used for VPN authentication, although there are parts of an IPsec communication that could potentially use a shared secret, where you have a word or a phrase that you would use on both sides, maybe just a random bit of characters, but they need to match. We use other ways to authenticate also with IPsec. That's not the only way to authenticate, but it's a very common way is to use a shared secret. But a community string is a very specific type of shared secret that is only used with SNMP. Therefore, IPsec VPN authentication would not be the correct answer. VLAN definitions are made in a switch configuration and have nothing to do with a community string in this configuration, or at least in this context of the question. And then an IPS signature doesn't use community strings at all. That's its own language, especially when you're trying to find and lock down what a bad or malicious type of code might be. IPS signatures can be very important, but they don't use community strings. The best answer, or the most likely answer that is available in this list, is the one that is server monitoring, and 50% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's now do another multiple choice. What do you think? We got time. Let's keep going with these questions. This next question on the list asks, here it is in my list, a network technician is taking a packet capture from a switch and notices all traffic is being sent to all interfaces. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be that one of the network devices is infected with malware? Is it that the VLAN interfaces are incorrectly configured? Is it that STP is not enabled? Is it that the MAC table is flooded? Or is it that SNMP is querying all interfaces? Which one of these could it be? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Now, notice how we kind of stuck more SNMP into this question. Were we paying attention in the last question? We're going to find out and see if that's something that we would include as an answer or we would exclude as an answer. Maybe you're able to put those together and figure out the details and answer it. If you think you know the answer, visit that URL, ProfessorMesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. See if you know the answer. This might be one you're familiar with too. If you haven't done any packet captures, by the way, highly encourage you to become familiar with this. It tells you everything about what's going on in the network. There's a lot of secret things happening out there, and you can find all the secrets just by capturing the packets. If you've never performed a packet capture before, there's a lot of education hidden within those packets, and it's something you can do for free on your own home network. If you haven't downloaded Wireshark and installed it, you should. It is an incredibly valuable tool. And regardless of what you ever do in your career in IT, whether it's operating systems, the cloud, working with networks, performing security features, you're doing AI, you're working with large storage systems, you will be able to take advantage of packet captures and use them to help troubleshoot in any one of those scenarios. Valuable skill, and it's one that can really help you throughout your career. So go download Wireshark at wireshark.org. And it's free. That's one of the great benefits. Sounds like a commercial that I'm making, but there's no money involved. Just go get that. It's really good. You'll love it. I should make some Wireshark videos. They'd be fun to do. Let's see how well you do with this one, though. The question asks, a network technician is taking a packet capture from a switch and notices all traffic is being sent to all interfaces. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it one of the network devices is infected with malware? The VLAN interfaces are incorrectly configured. STP is not enabled. The MAC table is flooded, or SNMP is querying all interfaces. Let's find out what you chose. We are all over the place. We got no majorities. In fact, it's interesting that we have 4 answers and then nothing. This is great. We've got 0% of you said that one of the network devices is infected with malware, which to me seemed like the obvious answer. So nope, not obvious to anybody. I have no idea what I'm talking about, clearly, because nobody chose that one. And then we have almost a 4-way tie for the next one. We have 33% that say the MAC table is flooded. That is the plurality of you. Not a majority, but certainly a plurality. We've got 25% that say SNMP is querying all interfaces, 23% that said the VLAN interfaces are incorrectly configured, and 19% of you say STP is not enabled. Wow, so there's a little bit that we have to parse through here. We need to peel apart all of the different layers of this onion to figure out what's happening. So this one says, a network technician is taking a packet capture from a switch. Whenever you are plugged into a switch and taking a packet capture, and you've not set any other settings, there's nothing in this statement that says they configured a span port, we're connecting to a tap, none of that. We're just connecting to a switch and taking a packet capture. When you do that, the only thing you should see is broadcasts, multicasts, because those are sent to all interfaces by default for most cases. Multicast perhaps may not be, depending on the switch configuration. And then lastly, it will capture unicasts that are directed to you, which may or may not be the case, depending on how you've set up your packet capture. So you may just see broadcasts and multicasts. Well, that means that if we're seeing all traffic from all devices that is being sent to all interfaces, the switch is effectively not a switch anymore. The switch is turned into a hub. Well, that's not how a switch is supposed to work. A switch is supposed to be very directed. That's one of the efficiencies of switching over using something like hubs. So it's got to be one of these other options to be able to work through this. One of the things that you'll find on a switch is that a switch keeps a big table inside of it with a list of all of the MAC addresses and all of the interfaces those MAC addresses are connected to, so that when it receives a frame, it knows where to direct that frame. So there's a nice big table inside of the switch that allows you to view all of that information. But what happens if that table becomes so big that it overflows? Well, now we're losing information. We can't add any more information into that table. So the switch realizes, wait, I might receive traffic that I'm not able to forward properly because my table is overflowed. My table has effectively been flooded. And because of that, I will now need to send all traffic to everybody just to make sure that all of the traffic is delivered properly, effectively removing the switch capability and turning that switch into a multi-port hub, a multi-port repeater down into that level. So that is a bit of a challenge, at least for the switch. From our perspective, everything's working great. You're receiving everything you're supposed to receive. But an attacker now is able to capture all traffic to that switch because they have flooded the table. So a neat little hack from the hacker's perspective to be able to make that happen. So this is a challenge. Now, many switches recognize that this is a vulnerability, and you have the option to be able to change how your switch reacts when that table fills up. So you are able to set configurations on most high-end switches that allow you to prevent this from happening. So there may be a way to help restrict what the hackers are able to do, what the attackers are able to do, because you have changed how the switch performs in that particular scenario. So when we look at the answers that we got, the MAC table being flooded, that's exactly what's happening here. A third of you, 33% of you at least, said that the answer is indeed the MAC table is flooded, and that's the answer we were looking for. 25% of you said that SNMP is querying all interfaces. SNMP queries have nothing to do with how the switch determines what traffic goes where. So that's not going to help either. SNMP normally will query many interfaces on a device, and that doesn't cause it suddenly to start sending all traffic to all interfaces, thankfully, or we probably wouldn't use SNMP if that was the case. 23% of you said the VLAN interfaces are incorrectly configured. By misconfiguring a VLAN on an interface, you're changing what subnet it is a part of. Technically, you're changing what broadcast domain it's a part of, but generally speaking, on a switch, the broadcast domain and the subnet are effectively the same thing. If you've done it right, they are the same thing. There are many people that have not done it right, and they are different things. Completely different scenario, which we could talk about later if you'd like. But mostly VLAN interfaces incorrectly configured will simply put somebody on a different VLAN. It will not change the way the traffic is forwarded through a switch. Then 19% of you said STP is not enabled. That is the spanning tree protocol. Turning on spanning tree or turning off spanning tree has no effect on the switch's ability to forward frames. Only thing it might do is restrict what interfaces are accessible on a particular switch, but it doesn't change the switching process from working like a switch to working like a hub. You imagine if we just turn off STP and suddenly it works like a hub, that would not be good either. So thankfully it does not work that way. And 0% said that one of the network devices is infected with malware. Even if a network device was infected with malware, it still would not cause the switch to suddenly start forwarding all traffic to all interfaces on the switch. So that is one of those scenarios where, although it seems like something that could be feasible, not feasible at all. And in fact, most of you decided, yeah, that's absolutely not feasible at all. 0% chose that one. Not one of those situations where we all chose the wrong thing. In this case, the plurality of you chose the right thing. The MAC table is indeed flooded on the switch, and 33% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is what we were looking for. Well, as you can tell already, we've gone through a number of different topics that come directly from the Network Plus exam objectives. And if you were to look at my course, it is 87 videos and over 12 hours of information. That is a big course of information. I cover every single one of the exam objectives in there. But not everybody has the time to go through all 87 videos or understand what spending the time to be able to look through 12 hours of that information. So what I've done is take everything that I have in those videos and I put it into a book. This is my course notes book. So let's look at a version of this course notes book. I've got a digital PDF version in front of me. This is the digital edition. And then I have a physical printed book. This is what I call the physical edition. Both of them are identical for content. In fact, let's flip through a couple pages of the digital version. You can see it is separated out by the different videos, one video after the other. For example, 1.2 networking functions is followed by 1.3 designing the cloud. I have cloud models, introduction to IP, and notice that all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the important tables that are from my videos are in these course notes. That is by design. So you can spend your time working on memorizing these important technical skills, understanding the information that's being provided in the video, instead of spending all of your time writing things down on a piece of paper or typing things into a notepad. This is something that you might want to use after you finish watching the videos, just so you have a consolidated list of every possible thing that is listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you get the physical version of this, by the way, now we're going to see two of me for a second here. If you get the physical version of this, which is perfect bound, like a paperback book maybe, this is one that I ship to you. And while you're waiting for this to be shipped, I will, of course, provide you with a free copy, a no-cost copy of the digital version. So you can download that digital version immediately and start reading it, start using it, start studying, and then you will receive these. We usually ship these out. It takes about 5 to 7 days to ship these out. So you'll get an email with the tracking information that will be shipped directly to you anywhere in the world. If you'd like more information on that, you can find it on my website at professormesser.com/NPCN. Let's do some more questions. Next on our list is this question that asks, a technician has identified a congested router between their office and a cloud service provider. Which of the following was most likely used to identify this issue? Did we use netstat, ping, nmap, ifconfig, or traceroute? A technician has identified a congested router between their office and a cloud service provider. Which of the following was most likely used to identify this issue? Is it netstat, ping, nmap, ifconfig, or traceroute? Do you think you know the answer? Please no answers in the chat room. Instead, follow that link on the screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. See if you know what this one might be. This is one of those situations where multiple tools could be used to help identify this particular issue, but only one tool that's listed is in here. I got a question about this earlier in the week in our Discord where somebody mentioned, here's a multiple choice question, and the one that I would have chosen is not in the list, therefore the question is invalid. I said, no, that's not how multiple choice questions work. Multiple choice questions say, here is a question. Here are the only possible answers available. You must pick the best one. Sometimes the best one in that list may not technically be the best one that you would choose overall, but that's not the question. The question is, which of the following would be the most likely one that you would use to identify this issue? So that's the real difference in multiple choice questions. And indeed, although many of us are comfortable using any utility we would like at home, that may not be the case when you're at the office. When you're in an office environment, there may only be certain utilities you are allowed to use or that you might have access to for a number of different reasons. Well, there's a lot of segmentation in large organizations. There was one organization I went into, I needed to install a device, a computer that would run a Windows service that would provide kind of a liaison between the Active Directory database and a firewall so that you could set firewall rules based on an Active Directory user or an Active Directory group. And it took, I think, 4 different departments to install that service because I needed the hardware folks. We were using a physical hardware device for this. So we had to get the hardware group there involved. Then I needed to get the operating system group involved. That's the Windows team. Then I needed to get the Active Directory folks involved because they needed to give me rights and permissions to access Active Directory. And I needed the security team involved to provide access to the firewall. So it's 4 different groups within the same organization. So you will not always have access to all of the tools you need to make everything happen. Sometimes it's a different group that needs to handle that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a technician has identified a congested router between their office and a cloud service provider. Which of the following was most likely used to identify this issue? Is it netstat, ping, nmap, ifconfig, or traceroute? And we can see that 60% of you say the answer is traceroute. It's what you would use. We have 18% that say netstat and 15% that say nmap. Then we're down to single digits. 6% of you said ping and 1% of you said ifconfig. So let's see what we would have chosen for something like this. We would have chosen traceroute. Traceroute gives you a way to view the route that a packet takes between you and another device on the network. If you're in Windows, it's TraceRT, because Windows doesn't allow you to write out things that are more than 8 characters long, or didn't used to. Really, but going back to the DOS days is the reason they summarized that into a smaller name. And then if you're in Unix or Linux or Mac OS, you can run the actual full named Traceroute, Traceroute, to be able to do that. I use MTR on my system. We'll look at the differences in the after show if you'd like to see it. Someone remind me in the after show to let's compare Traceroute with MTR and show the differences. I'll show you what I use when I'm troubleshooting something that is based on routes and having that work through there. It uses ICMP by default. This is the secret behind Traceroute. How do you know when a route is no longer available if you can't communicate to the route? You rely on the routers associated with that hop to send you a message back saying, can't get there, sorry. The time to live has been exceeded in your Traceroute. And if you watch my video on Traceroute, it's in the videos that you see here listed. It's 5.5 command line tools is the name of the video to show you all of that. Sometimes though Traceroute doesn't work because the router has been configured not to send back these time to live exceeded messages. There's a number of reasons that are good to be able to disable it, but for people like us that need to do troubleshooting, it's bad because we're not getting the information we really need to be able to work through this. Traceroute is a great one to use for this. And indeed, that is what most of you chose. In fact, the majority, 60% of you chose Traceroute as the answer. That is a great way to determine that. 18% of you say the answer is Netstat. Netstat gives you information on people connecting to your machine. How many inbound sessions are coming to our machine? How many outbound sessions are coming from our machine? Netstat can also show you information such as routing tables, for example, but it's showing you the information available to your local computer. In this case, your local computer has no idea that a router may be congested somewhere out in the internet world. So Netstat is not going to be able to help us at all, especially when we're trying to determine which one of those routers is the problem. That's a bit of an issue. Between us and another location, if you performed a trace route right now to 1.1.1.1, since we're on that IP address today, perform a trace route. And you'll notice there are multiple hops to get there. You're not directly connected to 1.1.1.1. You have to hop through a number of routers just to get there. So that is a good example of needing a level of granularity that's very different than other utilities. For example, 15% of you said Nmap. Nmap is a tool mostly used to perform port scans of a device to determine what ports may be open in a particular server. Well, having a list of the open ports doesn't give us any information about what routers may be congested, so Nmap is not going to be a very useful tool to provide that level of detail. We have 6% that said ping. Ping is telling us if a device across the internet is active and is able to communicate back with us, but it doesn't tell us anything about the hops in between. All it tells us is that, yep, we were able to connect to that device and get a response from that device. So that's very little information, quite honestly. It's just telling us that machine's alive. We were able to talk to it. It was able to talk to us. End of story. Well, did any routers have a congestion problem on the link between us and that device? I don't know. Ping can't tell you that. Ping will never be able to make you familiar with that piece of it. So ping is not the right answer either. And ifconfig shows us the interface configuration details in Linux or Mac OS. This is the same thing as the IP option. Similar functions available in IP. Ifconfig is also gives you a lot of details about a particular interface configuration, but it tells you nothing about how a remote router may be performing somewhere out on the internet. In this list, the only one of these that would have been able to provide you with any level of detail is indeed the one that says traceroute. Traceroute is the answer we were looking for. 60% of you chose that option, and indeed that is the one, the only one in this list that can tell you where a congested router might be on a number of hops between you and another device. So hopefully that can give you a little more context into all 5 of these different commands and when you might want to use them. Let's do another one. I've got others in this list. Our next question, you want what? You wanted a port number question? I'm so glad you asked for one. Here it is. This question asks, an administrator is adding a firewall rule to allow traffic to TCP port 587. What is the most likely use for this rule? Is it access information in a network directory, submit Windows print jobs, transfer logs from a server to a SIM, transfer emails between servers, or access a Microsoft SQL Server database? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. The question again asks, an administrator is adding a firewall rule to allow traffic to TCP port 587. What is the most likely use for this rule? Is it access information in a network directory, submit Windows print jobs, transfer logs from a server to a SIM, transfer emails between servers, or access a Microsoft SQL Server database? Lock in your answer by visiting professormesser.com/QA. Tell me what you think the answer might be. Lock it in, see if you know the details. This is a very common way that the exam tends to reference port numbers. As many of you are aware, there's a list of port numbers you need to know for the exam. But almost never, I would say 100% of the time, you will never get a question that says, what is the protocol used by a particular port number that they will give you? So what is the protocol used by port 80? And then you spit out the protocol name. They will never ask you this. That is just too trivial. That is a very direct question, and none of the questions on the exam, very few questions on the exam, are direct. Almost every question on the exam is asking about something that has context. And this is a good example of this. Here's a port number question, but I'm not asking you for the protocol. In fact, I don't care what the protocol is. What are you trying to do? In fact, this is the question we often ask in IT when somebody comes to us with a very detailed request. Hey, I need you to change the access permissions for this folder to be read, write, execute. Like, hold on. What are you trying to do? Well, we've got a user. They're located here. We're trying to load this. They'll give you, there's a whole nother story they give. And it turns out by listening to what they're trying to do, you realize there's actually a better way to do this. The thing you're trying to accomplish is not the right thing. Let's see if we can do this in the proper way, in the best practice for performing that. So this is a good best practice for the exam, is that you have to know the protocols, you have to know the port numbers, but perhaps more importantly, you have to know how to use them. And this is a how to use them question. Let's see how we do with this one and what you answered. The question again asks, an administrator is adding a firewall rule to allow traffic to TCP 587. What is the most likely use for this rule? Is it to access information in a network directory, submit Windows print jobs, transfer logs from a server to a SIM, transfer emails between servers, or access a Microsoft SQL Server database? Let's see how you did. We'll close our poll and see that 65% of you say you would transfer emails between servers. 10% of you said access information in a network directory. 14% said access a Microsoft SQL Server database. So 3 of them had double digits. Then we dropped down to 6% for submit Windows print jobs and 5% for transfer logs from a server to a SIM. The real important part of this one is sort of breaking down how we get from point A to point B and finally to point C, which is a very common thing on the exams, as I mentioned. Point A is TCP 587. That's the real key that is in this list for us to be able to answer this question. So we should automatically, in our minds, start thinking back, TCP 587, what is that? And if you do that analysis in your brain, you'll find that TCP 587 is SMTP. And then if you perform it even further, you keep going with that, you will find that SMTP is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. This is the protocol very commonly that is used for one mail server to send the mail to another mail server. There are a number of different port numbers that can be used for this. Sending it plain text, the default for this has always been TCP port 25. If you are using SMTP with the TLS encryption, which most people are these days, thankfully, then it is using a different port number. That port number looks very familiar. That is TCP port 587. So if we were trying to answer this question, we now have all of the details that we need to be able to answer this one. It is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol using TCP 587. So if we look through the list, the one that has anything to do with an email server communicating to another email server, it is the one that says transfer emails between servers. Very straightforward. And 65% of you chose that one. That is the right answer, the one that we were looking for. And that is the only one in this list that applies. So 14% said access a Microsoft SQL Server database. You would instead be using LDAP for that. Completely different set of port numbers for LDAP. 10% of you said access information in a network directory. This might be LDAP, it might be Radius, it could be a number of different ways to access information in a network directory. Could be Kerberos. Again, still doesn't use TCP 587. 6% of you said submit Windows print jobs, probably using SMB, the server message block. SMB does not use TCP 587. And then transferring logs from a server to a SIM, that is most likely using syslog. Again, syslog does not use TCP 587. In this list of things, the only thing it could possibly be is the one that we have here, transferring emails between servers. That was the answer we were looking for. That's the one we were hoping to find. And indeed, 65% of you got that one absolutely correct. I know we're at the top of the hour, and usually we stop, but I'd like to squeeze in one more question, if I could, into the things that we are doing today. This is because I got a question about this in our Discord the other day, and I thought it would be a good one to put on the Q&A here to see how well we know this particular topic. So let's do one more. Here we go. It's overtime, and in this overtime, this question asks a relatively direct question. It's a little bit different on here. This is one that asks, which of the following would be most related to 802.11h? For those of you in the UK, it would be 802.11h is what we would be using for this. Now, what uses that? Would it be band steering, enhanced encryption, network access control, ad hoc communication, or interference avoidance? Number of different options. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. The question again asks, which of the following would be most related to 802.11h? Is it band steering, enhanced encryption, network access control, ad hoc communication, or interference avoidance? Lock in your answers. Visit professormesser.com/QA. This is a topic that is directly listed in the Network Plus exam objectives. And that's really what the question was that we got in our Discord this week, was someone asking, where'd this come from? They couldn't find it in the list, but it is indeed in the list. So I thought, well, if it's hard to find or you can't find it or you're wondering about it, it just made me think of a question. So I thought I'd pose the question to you as well and see if you know which one of these would be most related to 802.11h. Because apparently that is something you do need to know for the exam because it is listed in the exam objectives. That's how you know. We'll talk about the exam objectives in just a moment and how important those are and being able to be familiar with what those are. Part of this question kind of gives away some functionality. You can sort of lean itself towards a particular series of answers if you are familiar with some of the nomenclature that we use for these standards. See if you have some familiarity with it. and being able to work through them. This would be something that also you don't have to worry too much about. It's one of those things where they give you the IEEE information, but in reality, these days, not necessarily an incredibly important thing to keep top of mind. I'll explain more about that in just a moment. The standard itself is important. So let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be most related to 802.11h? Is this band steering, enhanced encryption, network access control, ad hoc communication, or interference avoidance? We'll have to see what you chose. We will close that. We'll close the poll, and let's see what you chose. Wow, again, we've got a mixed group here, a mixed set of answers. 38% of you say it's interference avoidance. That is the plurality for the questions that we have. Everything else, the last four on here, almost a four-way tie. We've got 20% that say ad hoc communication, 15% that said band steering, 14% that say network access control, and 13% that say enhanced encryption. So we aren't really sure what the answer is on this one. 802.11, probably in your mind, you go, well, that's wireless. But all of the answers here have some type of hook into a wireless configuration. So it's hard to get rid of any of these particular answers. But if you are looking at the standard created by the IEEE, which is the 802.11h standard, this is one that helps wireless communication comply with international standards. And that is one challenge we have when we have this U.S. or North American-based standards group at the IEEE. Sometimes the standards don't necessarily match what's happening in other countries. And so we have to adjust our standards so that everything works better together on a global basis. But what specifically in the 802.11 world is the H standard associated with? There's a number of different things in the H standard. One of them is dynamic frequency selection. This is really useful. You've probably seen this on your access point, your more modern access points, where you can tell the access point, just find whatever happens to be open. This is a great use of the access point, by the way. It used to be you would have to pick a particular channel, and it would always be on that channel. Now we can tell the access point, use whatever channel no one else is using, which means if somebody else turns on an access point near you, your access point could adjust to find the best possible channel for you. That dynamic frequency selection. And 802.11h includes a feature for transmit power control. We don't always need to transmit at full amount of power. We don't need to send the signal everywhere, because the more signal we're putting out, the more interference we could be causing to other services, specifically satellite services that use similar frequencies. So 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz frequencies are used by, and the bands that we use there can be used by other services as well. They are open. So this particular standard was created so that your wireless network would play nicer with other devices and other networks that are out there. It effectively provides a way to avoid interference. And so most of what's involved in 802.11h best fits the category of interference avoidance, and 38% of you chose that one. In this case, most of you chose the right answer. 38% did. Got it absolutely correct. Now, why wouldn't it be ad hoc communication? Ad hoc communication, as you know, is a way that two wireless devices can communicate directly to each other without needing an access point in the middle. That's a standard, or has been part of the standard since the very beginning. So 802.11h, because it's associated with making the networks work easier together, has nothing to do with ad hoc communication. We have 15% that said band steering. This is how you can tell an access point to always use a particular band. Somebody's trying to communicate with an access point, and they have the choice between 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. You can configure band steering to always force a particular frequency. Again, not related to 802.11h. 14% say network access control. Network access control is an authentication mechanism. It is also not part of 802.11h. And 13% said enhanced encryption. Obviously, enhanced encryption is an important part of what we do. And in this particular case, though, 802.11h, that standard, did not have anything to do with enhanced encryption, and that would not be the choice that you would choose either. Now, everything that we've talked about today has come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Now, I've said that a number of times in our study group today. You should get your hands on these. They are absolutely free. They are downloadable from the CompTIA website, and they tell you everything you need to know for this exam. And I don't mean some things. I mean everything you need to know for this exam. Here is a set of the objectives that's on my screen. I'm going to go straight to the beginning that says Section 1.1, explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, OSI reference model. Here are the 7 layers of the OSI model. Then compare and contrast networking appliances, applications, and functions. You need to know routers, switches, firewalls, IDS, IPS, load balancer, proxy, NAS, SAN, wireless access points, wireless controllers, content delivery networks, virtual private networks, quality of service, and time to live. That's just for Section 1.2. So you've really got to get in there and understand what could be presented to you on the exam. This tells you everything. It's a great checklist that you can use as you are going through your studies. It's a great checklist to use before you schedule your exam to see if you're really ready. Did you really cover all of the topics? One of the most frequently asked questions we get on our site is, am I ready for the exam? One of the best ways to answer that question, this document. So download it from CompTIA directly. I have a link over to their site at professormesser.com/objectives, or simply go to your favorite search engine and type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you to the first page there, and you'll find that they are right there and available. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. We have already scheduled the next one for April. That is on April the 16th is our next Network Plus study group. It's also, we have one more study group this month. Next week at this time, next Wednesday, we've scheduled our Security Plus study group. So if you're interested in Security Plus, come on back a week from today, and we'll do the same study group structure, but all with Security Plus questions. Great place to go. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A. Hopefully that's given you some insight into things you need to know for your Network Plus exam. But we've got a lot more. We've got an after show where I will answer questions from you. Anything you'd like to talk about. It could be about CompTIA, it could be about technology, or it could be about really anything else. You're welcome to submit those at any time using that same QA link. We will go through your questions in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. I do want to thank you for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody. See, that's how the slide is supposed to look. When it comes up, it's supposed to show the correct March 2025 Network Plus configuration, and this one certainly does. I would love it if you would have a look at this link. If you want to submit a question for the second hour, this is the way that you do it. You go to professormesser.com/QA, and you're able to submit those questions. In fact, it even tells you on the screen now that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We'll be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. Oh, I didn't give you a CEU, did I? We didn't even talk about that in the continuing education unit credits. So I would like to give you the opportunity to earn a CEU by following these instructions. If you are wanting to renew your certification based on the continuing education unit, collecting those continuing education units, you can absolutely do that by going to professormesser.com, and at the top or the bottom of the website, there is a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, in the subject line, put March 2025 Network Plus, regardless of what the screen says. March 2025 Network Plus. And then in the body of the message, on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, band steering. Band steering are the super secret code words of the month. And then you can put anything else you would like in that message. I do read through every single one of these and then submit it. You don't have to put anything if you don't want to. Simply put the super secret code words and send it to me. Again, that process is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, put in your name, your email, click the Contact Us link. There's an important step. Then put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put March 2025 Network Plus. And in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, band steering. Band steering would be something we can put there. That is one of the best things that you can do to answer this particular question. We'll have that in the list there. So now I want to spend some time and answer your questions. This is just something we do. It's off the cuff. We haven't really planned anything, and it gives you the chance to submit questions at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you could submit the questions. On my side, I will be sifting through the questions, getting rid of the chaff and focusing on the wheat, if we want to say it that way, really focusing on the details of this. So if you are working through the planning for your certification, working through any questions you have with technology, working through career, getting a job, or anything else that you would like to ask someone who has spent their entire career in the world of IT and cybersecurity, here's your answer. Here's your opportunity to get an answer by submitting your question at the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to see what you would like to do. Let's now focus on some of the questions you have for the details. So this is, let's start with a question that may be one of the most frequently asked questions that I get. This one is from Mark, who asks, thank you, Professor Messer, for all your help. With your help, I've now passed my CSIS. This is the Security Plus, the Network Plus, and the A+. The A+ good for life. That may be something you might want to consider updating if an employer wants you to. So the question is, what do I do now? This is a good question, by the way. That's an important question. Now, Mark continues, would you recommend continuing with CompTIA or move to something different? My recommendation, here's my official answer, Mark. My recommendation doesn't matter. It's never mattered. My recommendation of what I would do is not the same recommendation of what you should be doing. And here's why. So this is, as I mentioned, probably one of the most frequent questions we get, because people would like to know, how do I build that pathway to get to where I want to be? And before we start talking about specific certifications or specific things you can do, I think we need to first determine, what are you trying to get to? What is the end of this first pathway? We're not talking about the end of your career. We're not talking about where do you see yourself in 10 years? That's first, nobody can even answer that one in the world of IT. We don't even know what the world's going to look like 10 years from now from a technology perspective. But the question is, what do you want to do next? So that's the context. What is it that you want to do next? So find out, think about in your mind what that next thing is. Maybe the next thing for you is getting your first job in IT. Maybe for many of us that are here, that's what the next thing will be. That's our next goal that we are striving for. That could be working in a help desk. It could be working in a network operations center. It could be working in a security operations center. You could be a field service technician. There are a number of entry-level positions in the world of IT that would fit perfectly for someone needing their first job in the industry. Now let's go back to your question. Let's say that's what you're working for. Your next goal is getting your first job in IT. So now let's go back to your question. What would you recommend? Would you recommend continuing with CompTIA or move to something different? Well, now we need to put these two things together. How do we get our first job in IT? We need to find somebody who has an open position in one of those roles that we would be qualified for. So if you're in a big city, this is a great place to start, a municipality, a particular geographical area. Let's now look at what jobs are open in your area that you would be qualified for as an entry-level technician. So you can think of the big companies that you have in your particular area. In fact, if you're wondering what those are, you can always Google top 10 companies in the name of your city. Top 10 companies in the name of your geographic area. The top 20 companies, and it will list them out for you. by the number of employees, by the amount of revenue, by the amount of something. They'll list them out in some particular order. That's a good place to start. Make a note of all those names. Take the top 10. That's a good place to start. We'll start with the top 10, put them into a spreadsheet. I mentioned this process, by the way, in a video that is in the YouTube video description of this video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video, which, by the way, is a long video for me. And that 30-minute video is chock full of ideas, thoughts, suggestions, processes, procedures, and things you can do to optimize the job hunt. And so this is one of those things. So let's make a spreadsheet. Let's list out all 10 of those companies. And now let's go to those companies' websites and let's look for open positions in that organization that we would qualify for. So obviously, we're not looking to be the CIO of the company. If they have an open position for CIO, we're not talking about that. You're not trying to be a CIO. You're not qualified to be a CIO yet. So now let's take a list of, maybe they have a job posting for a field service technician and they have a job posting for a help desk. I'm qualified for those. We'll write those two jobs down. Now, what do they expect of you? Well, for the help desk, they want this particular kind of education, they want this particular certification, and they want a knowledge or some use of these particular technologies. Write those down in your spreadsheet. Those are part of the same record for that same job. And you might even want to put details in there about when you saw this job posting and what page, what URL it happens to be on, so you can find it later. Now we have a job that we're qualified for, and we have information from the employer on what they'd like to see. And on the list of certifications, they might list CompTIA, they might list Cisco, they might list AWS, they might list, just go through the list of things, all these different certifications you could go for. It might be Microsoft Cert. There might be all kinds of things. So because I don't know what you're looking to do, I don't know what jobs are in your area, I don't know where you live, I can't answer that question. Only you can. So go through all 10 of those companies, find every open position across all 10 of those companies, and now take a step back. Now take a step back and look at that list and see if on that list you see some commonality. Are most of the employers looking for A+? Are most of the employers looking for Network Plus or Security Plus? Are they looking for a Microsoft cert? Are they looking for an AWS cert? What are they looking for? You should be able to either determine, look, everybody's looking for very similar things, or it may surprise you. You may find that everybody's looking for something different. So you may have to narrow your focus a bit. Well, I really want to work there. That's my first choice. So let's focus on getting credentials that that employer can appreciate. And you can, from there, just determine, here are a set of certifications that they would like. Let's see if some of those things matches what I'm interested in. And now you've got a good connection. Now you know what your direction is. Now you know what different steps you should put down to be able to make your way to that final goal. So instead of reversing the process and saying, hey, what cert do I take? We instead reverse the process. Where are you trying to get to? Now let's figure out what certs we should take. It's slightly different in context. The logic and the process is slightly modified, but it is an important consideration. We have to know where we're going. We can't just throw a lot of certs out there. Let's just collect every cert available so that when you walk in the door and they say, well, we're looking for people with a certain set of certifications. Do you have? Yes, I do. I didn't say the name of the cert yet. I have all of them. So you don't want to be that person. Being overqualified for a position is a real thing. You don't want to walk into an employer and say, here are the 12 certifications that I have. You are, as they say, a paper tiger. You are someone who has a lot of credentials on paper, but no practical experience yet. So we need to interlace those things. If anything, you can get every cert in the world. Just don't tell anybody you have every cert in the world. You want to walk in for that job and exactly meet the requirements, maybe go a 5 or 10% above the requirements for that position. You want to be the best qualified person for the skills that the employer has listed, because they know if your skill set goes well beyond what that job does, you will be very bored in that job and you will leave very quickly, probably for a job that better suits you. So pretty important for that to consider. Make sure that if you are someone who is working through finding what the next step is in your process of education in this industry, that you follow that particular path. And by the way, this process never ends. It doesn't end once you get the job. Once you get that first job in IT, now we set a different goal. What do you want to do next? Oh, I want to work with operating systems. I want to work with networking. I want to do security. All right, well now let's keep going through the list. Let's now determine what is the pathway that gets me from where I am now to where I would like to be. And we go through all of those. Hopefully that's given you some context. Thank you so much for submitting that question. That is a really, really important consideration for, I think, many people who are watching this, who have gone through our training courses and trying to determine, what do I do next? And how do I make a valuable decision, an important decision like this, and make it count? So there we go. We've now got something to go through. If you'd like to submit questions, you can do that at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA and submit your questions. That is professormesser.com/QA. More in our list of things. This is a similar question to the one we just had, so I think it's a nice follow-up. Gosh, and I just archived it. Let me bring it out of my, can I bring it out of my archive? I think I can. Let's have a look at this question, which I think it is. There we go. We've now got the question published. And this is from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, are masters becoming more baseline in addition to IT certifications in order to get higher paying jobs? I'm assuming here you mean a master's degree, a master's in a particular field as part of what we are doing. Master's degrees in the United States anyway, the way that these degrees tend to work is you have a bachelor's degree is sort of your, we can even go back even further. And associates in arts degree is a 2-year degree. We often just call them an AA degree or a 2-year degree. A bachelor's degree, bachelor's of science, bachelor's of, there's a lot of different bachelors of very large scope. That particular requirement is a bachelor's degree is a 4-year degree. And we'll often in the United States refer to that as a bachelor's. We refer to it as a college degree. We refer to it as a 4-year degree. If you want even more education, because you just haven't got enough in that 4 years, 5 in my case, of getting that bachelor's degree, the next level up, another 2 years, and you can earn a master's degree, a master's in that particular field. So now you've been in school 6 years at that point. But let's say that's not enough. Let's say you want even more learning. So you need to spend even more time, usually another year, sometimes 2 years, to get a doctorate, a PhD. That degree is one that is, I guess it qualifies in the United States for someone to use the title of doctor. But generally in the United States, you are either an actual medical doctor using this, or you're just somebody who likes to hear somebody use that name with you. I don't know why people use that term doctor to describe themselves when you're not a medical. It can be confusing when you're not a medical doctor. So in the United States, we tend to think of the title doctor as medical doctor. And when we use it outside that scope, it tends to be confusing. Although I understand why somebody who's worked that long to get a PhD might like to hear it every once in a while. I get it. But that's not generally how it works. Technically speaking, for example, if you're talking to a lawyer, that degree that they got in law school is a doctorate degree. They're technically a doctor, but we don't tend to call lawyers doctors. I mean, I'm not sure who we're offending at that point. Are we offending doctors or are we offending lawyers? We'll have to make that decision later on, I guess. I like my doctors and I like my lawyers. So maybe I'm weird along those lines. The question, though, finally, with that definition in place, is this becoming more baseline in addition to IT certifications to get higher paying jobs? I have not seen a trend in the United States along those lines. I have seen a trend of more people getting their masters, which is, I don't know if it is because people feel that it gives them a heads up, a leg up, an advantage, or if there really is more of an advantage in the world of IT. Generally in IT, there is no higher level type of degree required. Having a 2-year or a 4-year degree, 4 years is probably the sweet spot for positions in IT. What you may find, however, is once you get past technical roles, many organizations that want you to be in a leadership position, so you have a manager, you are a director, you're a senior director, you're a vice president, many of those roles tend to require a 4-year degree or higher. So you may find that if you are interested in moving out of the world of a technical role and into the world of a managerial role, which is a common pathway in IT, you may find that you will need a higher level education to be able to qualify for those positions. For most of us, however, I have had in the world of IT, I have worked in a technical role and I have worked in a managerial role as a systems engineer manager. I personally did not enjoy it and went back to being a systems engineer. Ironically, made more money as a technician than I did a manager. Just the way the world works, I guess. Plus, I had more fun being someone down working at the technical level. But I think this is the value of IT. It's one of the many advantages that IT brings to the table. If you're getting into this industry, there's so many options available to you. If you like being a technical person, you can be a technical person and make a lot of money. Be very financially successful. If you want to get into the world of management and be able to have leadership roles in these organizations, be a CIO, be a CSO or higher, then you might want to move into those roles. Those roles are absolutely available in IT. They're not a technical role. They are a planning, a process, and a managerial and a leadership role. All of these are available. Some people love that. So even though it didn't work for me, that may be exactly what you want to do. So in those particular cases, maybe a master's degree works for you. Maybe it's something you get in when you're in college and you don't immediately start using the credentials. But later on in your career, you decide, I want to move into management. I want to move into a leadership role in this organization. And if that's the case, your 4-year, your master's degree, your doctorate degree, those may have value for you. I realize you're planning for something that hasn't happened yet. And so the investment to get a master's degree may or may not be a good break even. You have to do the ROI on that one, the return on investment, because there is a significant cost for going down that additional 2 years in a master's degree to be able to earn that. So just something to keep in mind as you are going through the planning process for you. I'll give you a perspective. I've worked with, hundreds of people in this industry. And some of the people I worked with have degrees that are 4-year degrees. Most of the people I worked with had 4-year degrees. Not all of the 4-year degrees had anything to do with technology, including myself. My degree is in business management, not management information systems, not IT management, not technology related management, just business management. I took a lot of financial courses. I took a lot of a business law course. I took business calculus. That's what they make you do. Colleges are great at gatekeeping, and that was my gatekeeping course. I took courses in marketing, but no required courses in technology. So I got a degree that has a non-technology degree. And I worked with a lot of people that had non-technology degrees. I worked with people that had civil engineering degrees, not really a technology degree. Clearly a nice 4-year degree, but it was not related to technology. I worked with people that had no college degree that I was working side by side with, that were making as much, in some cases, more money than I was making. How's that for IT, providing different options for what we were doing? So you do find a different set of opportunities, and you need to be sure that you are able to focus on what opportunities make sense for you. And maybe getting that extra 2 years in a degree is a good idea. Maybe it doesn't fit into what you want to do. And of course, if later on in your career you wanted to go back to school and spend another 2 years getting a master's degree, there are a lot of options after the fact as well. So you don't have to focus on that for the things that you are doing. So hopefully it's giving you some perspective, some ideas, some thoughts. It's not a simple answer. And in fact, you may not know if you made the right decision until 20 years have gone by. That's sort of life though, isn't it? Let's keep going through the list of questions that you have. Thank you for submitting that question, Anonymous. That actually was interesting to kind of parse through and figure out the details with. So let's keep going in this list. So let's go through. Here is one. I'm going to answer this question in a couple of ways because this is one style of question that I get all the time. The frequently asked questions of this is from Patrick. This is Patrick who asks, Professor, are repeaters in layer 1 of the OSI model? Just clarify. Just tell me. What do you think it is? So this is one of the things that I want to give you the answer, but let me first talk about the OSI model and how we use it. This is a model that is designed to help one person communicate with someone else regarding a particular technology and communicate in a way that both sides know what you're talking about. It's almost like a second language that we can use to describe certain technologies, situations, problems, issues, or challenges that we are having. So the OSI model is a great breakdown of where data is in the flow between one device and another. Whether that flow is in the application that someone's using, maybe it's inside of a router, maybe it's inside of a switch, maybe the traffic is going across a wire, maybe it's going across a fiber. And there are obviously different devices on the network that is involved in that pathway between one device and another. But every time that one device sends data to another device, it uses some aspect of this model to communicate. We're able to apply the model to that communication. It's a better way to put that. The model itself is, as the name implies, it's a model. It is not a technical breakdown of how data is transferred between devices. It's a broad description of how data is transferred between devices. And because it is so broad, it also is misinterpreted and the subject of many arguments. and as I've mentioned in other study groups, arguing about what is in what layer of the OSI model is a relatively pointless exercise. I guess it's interesting from a purist perspective, and you really want to focus in on how does this really work and how does this model really apply to this? I get that part of it. But I feel that a lot of the questions that I get in my inbox that are very similar to this one, hey, where are Ethernet cards? Where's an Ethernet adapter fit in the OSI model? Where do repeaters fit in the OSI model? I feel like I'm being asked to resolve a bet between two people. And they're waiting to hear what my response is so that one person will win the bet, one person will lose the bet. But the OSI model is not quite that strict. It is not quite as cut and dry as saying, where does this fit? Stick it in a layer. Sometimes in the OSI model, protocols, devices, functions will span multiple layers. Maybe they'll span into half of a layer. Very often we'll describe a particular protocol as fitting partly in layer 3 and partly in layer 4, for example. There are some protocols like that out there, and it really depends on how you interpret them. So one thing that I will say before answering this question is I will give you an answer, but that answer is absolutely one that you could interpret in different ways as to how it applies into this model. I'm going to give you my answer of how I am applying it into this model. I feel like my answer is the right one, but that doesn't mean it really is, because you may be considering a different usage for this particular technology. So the question here is, are repeaters in layer 1 of the OSI model. Layer 1 of the OSI model is physical layer. So the physical layer, although most of the time we think about the physical layer as the physical medium that is being used to communicate. So this may be in the world of Ethernet, for example, we sometimes think of the layer 1 of the OSI model as the cable or the fiber. I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I think that layer 1 of the OSI model is the signal itself. It's getting the information from one device to another across a particular medium. That means that it could be wireless. It means the air is part of OSI layer 1 because your signal's going through the air. We have signal going across a copper cable. That signal is what is involved in OSI layer 1. And if you're having problems, if you have a bad cable, it's not that the cable itself is the issue. It's that the signal can't get through the cable because the cable is bad. So in that way, you could probably fit the cables and the fibers into that layer 1 of the OSI model. Some people think of the OSI model in the way that data is transferred and how the communication process occurs. For example, the switches are commonly associated with layer 2 of the OSI model, the data link layer. That data link layer looks at the MAC address as an important part of that layer. The MAC address is the major component of layer 2. And because switches make their forwarding decisions based on the destination MAC address, switches fit into the OSI layer 2. Now, don't switches connect to wires and fiber? Cables of copper and fiber? Yes, they do. But we don't talk about the operational aspect of switches being at layer 1. We talk about switches. Switches are a layer 2 device because we talk about where they operate and where they fit into the model. So repeaters, going back to this question, repeaters take information that's coming in from one network connection. They regenerate the signal and they send it out another side. There is no thought process as to where traffic comes in and where it goes out. We often refer to these as a device that has a Gazenta port and a Gazeta port because everything goes into one port and it goes out of the other. And there's no logic here. The only logic is traffic came in here, traffic goes out there. There's just two doors. There's an indoor and an outdoor, and that's it. There's no analysis that has to be done. We don't have to look at IP addresses. We don't care what subnet anything is a part of. We don't care what the MAC address is. We don't care what application is in use. We don't care what port numbers are used. All we care is that signal came in one door, we regenerate it, and we send the signal out the other door. That is the extent of the transaction. And because of that, it's layer 1 of the OSI model. That's what we're talking about. So we're only dealing with signal. We're not dealing with the MAC address. We're not dealing with the IP address. We're not dealing with the port number. We're not dealing with the application or anything else in between. All we're caring is, did we receive a signal? Did we regenerate the signal? Did we send the signal out the other way? If there's a problem with that repeater, it's a layer 1 physical problem because it affects the ability to send a signal through a particular medium. And that's why I stick it in layer 1 of the OSI model. People will argue that it's layer 2 because it is a physical thing and it has different interfaces. And no, you're not right. It's layer 1. You're not correct. If it was a switch, it would be a layer 2 device. So a good example of that. And that's where you get into this weird world of let's have a fight about what exists at what layer of the OSI model. If you're at that point, you're looking too detailed at the model. You need to look broader so that we can use this to describe what's going on. That way, you can if you say to someone, I'm looking at the problem you sent to me yesterday, I think it's a layer 3 issue. Immediately, that technician should go, it's a layer 3 problem. It could be IP address, it could be subnet mask, it could be a routing problem, it could be a DNS configuration issue. There are a lot of things you now go through. Did I put in the wrong IP address? Did I put in the wrong subnet mask? Did I put in the wrong default gateway? Is the default gateway having a problem? We're having a problem routing. And because of that, it's a layer 3 problem. So immediately we know when we say that we think it's a layer 3 issue, we know that we don't think it's anything dealing with the signal. We don't think it's a cable problem. We don't think it's a fiber problem. We don't think it's a switching problem. We think the problem is with something relating to TCP/IP. therefore, really IP, therefore it's layer 3. So it's a very good example of figuring out how those fit into the whole scenario of what fits where on the OSI model. And if you're fighting about it, then it's an interesting conversation at times. I think there's a place for those conversations. We can have the conversation about, do you go with Windows or do you go with Mac? We can have that argument. Obviously, you don't go with Linux. I look forward to your cards and letters. I did that purposefully. I didn't mean that. And that's where you get into scenarios like I am, where I use all of them. I have Linux servers. I have Mac in front of me, and you've already seen my Windows. I don't know if I ran the Windows config here, but I've got Windows on a VM running right now on the system, and I have other computers that I use that are Windows related. But we have this need in our industry, maybe as humans, to really take a subject and just tear it apart and rip into it and go through the details of it and really understand it. Whether that's IT, whether it's politics, whether it's the weather, whether it's religion, whether it's anything. Just we have this need to want to rip things and get into the details of things. The OSI model, you don't want to get into the details of things. It's a broad descriptor. And then once we talk about it's a layer 3 issue, we now have a context. We now have a subset of things it could possibly be. Now we can talk about the details. Oh, you think it's layer 3? Do you think it's a routing issue? Do you think maybe we have the wrong subnet mask? Now you can start talking about what it is. But notice you don't say, oh, do you think it's a bad cable? No, it's not a bad cable. I just told you it was a layer 3 problem. It can't be a bad cable. We already tested the cables. Therefore, I know it's not a layer 1 problem. It's layer. So by saying it's layer 3, now you've sort of narrowed the scope and allows you to communicate with a similar language that allows you to have, whether you know what's on the other side or not, you can talk about where you think the problems might be and kind of focus on those. And that's my recommendation to you is don't worry about the details for that particular topic. Go out a little bit broader when you're talking about OSI and focus on that. And you'll be able to parse it out once you kind of step back a bit. It makes a lot more sense. Let's keep going through the list. I have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so let's definitely go through as many of these as possible so that we can break down what your questions might be. As always, you can submit the questions with the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. If you're watching this on a replay and you'd like me to answer some questions for your study group, you can always send me that information by going to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website and clicking the Contact Us link. So let's keep going through the things that you are submitting, and we'll break down some of those in this list. Here's a very broad question, but it is an important question, perhaps more important than we tend to think about in the world of IT. Dan asks, how can you be an effective communicator? This is, I think, one of the most important skills in IT. What? Communicating? Yes, communicating is an important skill in IT. And I think it's because a lot of us in the industry are very focused on the technical details. We have our own language about things. Oh, we need to do some patches. Should we just deploy the MSIs, or should we configure an automated script that runs after the RGP backup? There's this whole thing. If somebody it had nothing to do with IT and they were standing next to us, they say, what are you saying? Is that English? Are you talking right now? What is that? There's just so many words and terms and things that we use that being able to properly communicate what you're trying to do, how you are doing it, how you're addressing a problem is in some cases more important than your ability to solve the problem itself. This is the challenge we are constantly running into in the world of information technology. And you will find that in a lot of job descriptions, they talk about communication. They talk about how you are able to communicate from one person to another. This, I think, is going to be a more challenging issue in the next number of years, because I found that when we did sort of the COVID shutdown, that it had a dramatic impact on our ability to communicate. And I think we've started to see that we're now ramping up again. We're now it's taken a long time to come out of that slowdown. And we're now finally starting to see a little more activity in projects, in companies, in things that are happening around the world. Things are now starting to ramp up. We're starting to see a little bit of a trend there. And because of that, we now have a lot of people that have not needed to communicate. In fact, we specifically put masks on. And that made it very difficult to communicate. I could hardly even talk to someone. I just wanted to have a conversation with you. How are we doing okay? How can you talk to anyone with a mask on? So we have stunted our ability to communicate with other humans, because you need really the entire thing to be able to do that. One advantage we have had that COVID really helped us with is remote communication. So now we expect there to be a camera turned on when we are communicating with someone. Wasn't that way just 5-6 years ago. It's very different. So back to the question, how can you become an effective communicator? There are a number of ways to do this, a number of things that may just be a series of tasks that you work into. The jobs that I've had in my career in IT have really been, for the most part, about the ability to communicate. I started in as a field service technician. You still need to communicate with people when you're going from place to place, and there still needs to be a way to do that. Where you run into problems is when you get into roles where you need to present something. Here is my recommendation for resolving this particular problem, whether that is in an email or whether it's in a formal presentation in a room full of people. And in my career, I sort of moved into a role that was with a company that makes products, as a technical representative of that company, as a systems engineer. And systems engineers are effectively translators. They're liaisons between what the customer is trying to do, what their challenges are, what the problems are they would like to solve, and the technologies that you are representing. And they say, well, we want to solve this problem, and this problem. I'm glad you have that problem, because we have an answer for that problem, and here it is, and here's how this technology can solve all three of those problems, and you can get it for the low price of this. A set of processes and procedures that happens every day, all the time, everywhere around the world. This was probably the fun part for me as having that role, was that I'm working with all kinds of interesting technologies, and they presented me with a puzzle. They presented me with these 3 things they're trying to fix. And they want me to see, does your product fix that? And if it does, how does it fix it? Oh, let's put together the puzzle. And now I get to sort of put the whole scenario together and then explain to them the advantages of this technology, what it can do, how easily that it works. And the better you're able to communicate, the more succinct, the more efficient you are with your communication, and the more accurate you are with your communication, the better you'll be able to get those across to the customer or to the other person that you're working with. In those particular roles that I was in, I started as a corporate trainer in one of my very first jobs. And I think that's what gave me the practice of speaking in front of people. And this is the one thing they always probably don't mention enough of, is you need practice. You don't stand in front of a room of 500 people and are able to talk to them in a very casual and cogent way without having some experience doing it, without leading up to it. You can't just jump in. You really need a training that gets you from point A to point B. Some of it is training that's done by fire. Well, okay, here's a conference room full of people. Go tell them why this is important. Okay, let's do that. You can adjust your mind what you want that to be. Sometimes you start with cards, you start with notes or script even, and you use the notes to lead you through the conversation. And I think that's a reasonable way to go about this. Oh, you want to know about this product? Let's start with the origin of the product. This product started with blah, blah, blah. Now let's talk about the 3 main benefits of this product, 1, 2, and 3. You can kind of go down your little cheat sheet, your summary that you would like to use. Eventually you get to a point where you can do that without having any notes because you've done it so often and you sort of have built a way in your mind to structure the conversation in a way that everybody can keep track and understand what you're going through, talk about. When I was in these roles as a systems engineer, they even sent us to training on how to talk to people. If you can imagine. This was training that was presented. The one that I took was a Decker training, Decker. And it was one where you would stand in front of a group. They would record you doing this, video recording, and you would present something. And then once you presented for 5 minutes, they would turn on the recording. How painful does that sound? And watch you and critique you. So this is one where you have to really, I really don't want to do it. We're all doing it. So of course you don't want to do it, but we're going to do it. But what was interesting is the critique of this. Once you get past the uncomfortable part of it, now you can start breaking down what the experts say. Don't do this. You should do this. For example, one of the biggest problems people have when they're talking is what they do with their hands. And sometimes they're holding on to something and maybe they got a pen and they're clicking the pen, or maybe they use their hands a lot when they talk and they describe the way things are working. Sometimes it's a little off-putting. Or sometimes someone's just standing in front of a large crowd. What do you do with your hands? Do you put your hands in your pockets? Do you put them behind you? Do you clasp your hands in front of you? You always see those corporate images, those corporate pictures of here's the holiday party and everybody's standing there in their suits with their hands in front of them like somebody's about to throw something at them, like they're waiting on a free kick. I don't know. They're standing there like they're protecting everything there with their arms. Why don't you just put your arms at your side? This was one of the main things I took away from my Decker training. Just stand there with the arms right next to you, just hanging. Just put them right there. Now spend 60 seconds talking about this without moving your arms, just next to you. And one of the things they mentioned is after that 60 seconds, they said, how did that feel? And every person says, that feels weird. Feels odd just to stand there with your arms at your side. They go, okay, let's look at the video. And you watch the video, and it's the most perfectly normal looking, comfortable view of someone standing there and talking. So we have an interesting perspective of what we think ourselves, what we think we look like, but then we have the actual perspective of what we really look like. Sometimes we're just trying to put those two things together to make ourselves an effective communicator. So before we leave this topic, and I know we're getting to the top of the hour and I've been talking about it quite a bit, but I appreciate you hanging in there with me. Let me describe to you me failing at my job of being an effective communicator. This should be fun, right? So this is one where in my career, I have been sort of on the technical side of things. I have been in IT management. I've even been in a technical marketing role. So I worked with Network General, Network Associates and Network General. I worked in a technical marketing role with that organization. So I would understand how these products worked at the technical level and be able to translate that into website content, product content, information that people can read about these technologies that would help them understand the value of these technologies. So it really was a translation role from technical to non-technical. That's what a technical marketing role tends to be. But my role was also to speak to a lot of people and to speak to analysts. There was one time I was in the back of a taxi in New York City, heading to an airport probably. So I probably finished talking to somebody and I was asked to speak to analysts. These are people in our industry that keep track of technical goings on, what's happening with different companies, what they're working on, and talks to both companies and to buyers about what technologies are out there and what companies are really doing things well. So these are important people to talk to. And I talked to press, I talked to analysts, I talked to customers, and I spoke at a lot of events doing this. So this was a phone call. I'm in the back of a taxi on the phone. I have a set of cards because I really haven't done any of these calls before with analysts. And where's my cards? So I have these cards. I'm talking to people. I've got my cards up. I say, Thank you. It's so good. I appreciate your time today. As I'm at, I just dropped all the cards on the floor, and now they're all over the floor of this taxi, and we're going across a bridge, and I can't, now my cards are everywhere. I don't have my notes. And so today, let's talk about the things that we're doing with the network management technologies. And I'm trying to find the right card. Where's the first card of the? And so I stumbled through the presentation, and it was horrible. It was horrible. It was absolutely miserable. Just awful. It was probably the worst feeling when you're trying to talk to people on the phone and you don't really know what you're doing because they didn't. And you feel like such a failure when that happens, to the point that thanks so much for your time today. Our time is up. Thanks so much. Bye. I hang up the cell phone. I immediately called my boss, and her voicemail picked up, and I said, "Hi, it's me. I just got off the phone on the analyst call with analyst blah, blah, blah. And it was awful. And you might want to give them a ring to see if you can fix whatever it is I just did." She did call them, and to my point with them, thankfully they were nice about it and said, "No, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as what you're making it out to be." I don't think that was true. But I'm very hard on myself. I think they were being very nice, but that gave me the ability to talk to my boss and said, "How can we make this never happen again?" And she said, "Here are things we can do next time, and we'll figure this out." But because I went through such a bad experience doing that, just an embarrassing, frightful, horrible experience, it makes you think about how you can fix it. I mean, I could have quit. That was one way to fix it, but I really liked the job. So I sat down and thought, how can I resolve this? How can I fix it for later? Going through something like that really helps you put things in order and makes it so that you can learn from that experience. The only time we tend to learn is when something is broken. If everything's working, there's not much use using those synapses to try to fix a problem that doesn't exist. But as soon as the network breaks, as soon as a router is misconfigured, as soon as a switch is not working the way we'd expect, or as soon as you're expected to be able to have these conversations with analysts and press, you have to fix whatever is not working right. So that is a great, important opportunity. So at the time, I felt miserable. And even thinking back on it, I kind of have a little bit of cringe sweat just thinking about the entire situation. But because it happened, I got better at these conversations. And I had a different process so that that problem wouldn't happen again. And I had a different way of approaching the conversation that allowed me to not get caught in that scenario again. So that was important there. But it made a good story that I could tell other people that failure is an option. It's not a great option, but it fixes things. Failure fixes things for you. Failure allows you to fix things. And I think that is what really is the difference for communication, is you have to just keep doing it over and over and over again. There will be times when you have a bad presentation, where you give the wrong information, where you are not prepared for talking to people, where you are put in a position where you know you can do better and you tend to improve on that. You just need the practice. So like anything else, to become an effective communicator, you have to start communicating. You have to jump off of that bridge. You have to jump into the water and start swimming. And you may not know how to swim very well, but trust me, after you start swimming for a while, you suddenly, I'm getting the hang of this. Oh, I see. Now we're really swimming. I'm going pretty fast now. Now I understand what's going on. And it starts to become second nature. I think that's sort of what led me into this particular role, as being someone who can take topics and present them on the internet, and we can all talk about what those topics happen to be. I don't use a script. I don't write to a particular list that I am reading off, because I don't think people want to hear that. I think people want to hear kind of a free flow of what I think this works like. But you can only get that type of rhythm of conversation if you have done it a lot. And the more you do it, the easier it will come. So although it seems insurmountable, and in many cases, like you're never going to be able to conquer this fear of talking to people, I will tell you, it is one of the most important skills in IT, and you should endeavor to learn as much as you can about communicating with people and how to do it and how to grow with it and how to learn how to do it better. And I think the more you do that, the better of not just a better communicator you will be. Obviously, you'll be a better communicator. You're going to be a better technical person. You're going to be a better technician because you can communicate better. There's always that story of, yeah, we have this really smart person, but we have to keep him in the back room because as soon as he walks out here, he's going to say something wrong or offend somebody. And unfortunately, there are people like that in our industry. Thankfully, not a lot. It's really a very unusual case where you would run into something like that. Most people I have found are very personable, are very conversational. I've been to I used to do 3 or 4 meetings a day with different companies where I would meet with everybody there who was involved in either their networking team or their security team. So you're having a meeting with 5 or 6 people. You're having about 4 of those a day. You're going to lunch with them. I met the nicest people. They always had something interesting, not just on the technical role that they were working on, but they were interesting people. They had interesting things that they did because it's nice to talk about business, but occasionally people say, so what'd you do last weekend? Oh, I went fishing. Oh, where do you go fishing around here? What'd you go out and do? I used to go fishing. And we'd have a fishing conversation. Or, oh, I have my son, he's a dirt bike racer. Tell me about that. So we'd have these conversations about the type of motorcycle they had and then what they did and where they went and what is the process. And is it just one race or is it multiple races? It things I didn't know. We have a conversation about that. Almost 100% of the people I would meet without fail in the world of IT were perfectly normal individuals living their life. They could converse with you. We could have conversations about what they were doing with their networks, and we could have conversations about what they were doing on the weekend. I think the television and movie industry tends to over accentuate different aspects of people, whether it's mannerisms or things associated with them as a person or whatever it happens to be. And they tend to think of technical people as very smart, very nerdy people that have classes, they talk funny, and I can't find any of those people. They don't exist. But yet there is that odd perception that the rest of the world has with technical people. I personally think it's an advantage. They're expecting someone really nerdy to show up with their pants hiked up really high, and then we show up. And you're a perfectly normal looking person, and you're talking normally to me, and you don't have this air of nerdism about you. This is not what I was expecting. Sometimes getting that non-expectation there, you have this extra now advantage when you walk into these situations. I don't know why we tend to do that as a people, but we do. And we don't just, of course, stick to technical for that. We sort of do it across the board as humans. Maybe it is a weird human thing that we work on. So I would encourage all of you, of course, go download Wireshark and learn how to capture packets. Go grab the latest Linux operating system and load it up into a VM and start working with Linux. Become more familiar with these Network Plus and technical aspects of this exam, but don't forget about the communication, because ultimately everything that we do is about one human communicating to another human. Yes, there's a lot of technology right underneath that, but ultimately what we're trying to do, whether it's to provide a service to someone else, it's to make sure that our law enforcement and emergency services are working, our hospitals are working, our airlines are working, making sure that our banks continue to operate, making sure that manufacturing continues to work, that our power systems are working. All of those things are all technical. There is a technology about all of those. But more importantly, it's about getting medical services to people, providing power to people, getting a manufactured product into someone's hands. It's about people. And if we can remember that there's that balancing act where learning more about the technology allows you to help more people, then it becomes sort of a different play in your mind, and it allows you to approach the industry and the things that you are planning in a very different way. Just another thing to think about. Maybe that will give you some context for what we will be doing over the next number of months in these study groups. Maybe that can give you an approach there as well. Hopefully, I think that's given us a good place to stop. Thank you so much for joining us today in our first hour in the Q&A that we did. We always have a good time doing that. If you enjoyed that, come back next week for our Security Plus study group. And of course, check our calendar if you would like to know when the next Network Plus study group will be. Of course, that's at professormesser.com/calendar, or simply choose the calendar from the main menu. Thank you also for your questions in the second hour. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to all of them. We were overwhelmed with the questions that were here, but thank you so much for these. And maybe we can focus on some of these questions in the next study group as well. And of course, we are always available on our website. If you have questions or things where you're trying to find information about Network Plus or anything else with certifications, you can always find the Contact Us link at the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.